let me say a little more about some of the things that people are doing. There are now 8 states who are banning chemtrails. There are 28 states who are reversing who have already reversed DEI rules and expenditures. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they're reversing their rules and taking the money that was going into DEI in their states and putting that instead into police, into security, into protecting people. And then another one is that an NIH official has come out and admitted that they funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. And so it's getting more and more obvious. Let me recite a few of the ways that it's getting really obvious what's going on. First of all, a second Boeing whistleblower was killed. He was in the midst of testimony about a whistleblower testimony on the corruption and the cutting corners at Boeing that's causing all of these parts to fall off the planes and really limit the safety. We talked about Bill McGuire, the guy who blurted out the depopulation agenda. In Slovakia, the president of Slovakia so far he has survived an assassination attempt, but he was shot 5 times. He's in critical care. So why would that be? Is that some random coincidence? And of course, the official report is that there's some lone wolf, just like Harvey Oswell, just a lone crazy guy out there. It couldn't have anything to do with the fact that this was 5 days after his saying no to the COVID jabs and to the WHO treaty and to more financial support for Ukraine. Remember, there were 4 African national leaders assassinated during the beginning of COVID who refused to do the mandatory vaccine. So it's absolutely tragic. But like we were talking about with Wayne earlier, these are the things that people go, and you see maybe 1 and it's an abnormality. You see 2, it's a coincidence, but you see 3 of these and you start to see the pattern. Then you see movies like Thrives and all the other great stuff that's coming out now. And if you're open to it at all of a sudden, all the craziness that just didn't make sense, all of a sudden makes a lot of sense, even though it's not good news. And then once you've got the diagnosis, you can actually come up with the cures. So continuing on, it turns out that there's now evidence, whistleblowers have come forward, proving that the Dominion voting machine software, the motherboards, which is the key operating element in it, were made in China and then repackaged in Taiwan to try to cover that up. And a lot of in Mike Lindell's movie, he showed very clearly how a lot of these packet captures, where you're going from the various states in the middle of the night, getting put on the internet, going to China, Spain, North Korea, Italy, and so forth, going to these places, most of them to China, where they were being shifted and then put back on the internet, sent back into these polling centers. And that's exactly the time when all of a sudden Biden, who was following by a large margin, all of a sudden took the lead at 3 a.m. So more proof of what was really going on with the election fraud that hopefully can be avoided this time around. Another bit of news is that bankers in Latin America are using the climate change scam to introduce digital currency there and then globally, other countries as well. So beware, this is why it's important to connect the dots. When all of a sudden they're using the climate scam to, as their so-called pandemic dies out, now it's a climate change that's going to cause the next pandemic. Oh, and in the interest of solving climate change, we need to go to a CBDC. And then a classic one is Chris Cuomo, who any of you who inflict CNN on yourselves occasionally, like I do, are familiar. Chris Cuomo was finally fired from CNN. Now he's got a new job with News Nation, and he's trying to ride the fence. He's trying to please both sides. There's remarkable footage of him just ranting against how the people who are denying the need for mandatory vaccines should be put in concentration camps. Now he has just had to admit that he's on ivermectin himself right now because he's had considerable vaccine injury. Another one is Melinda Gates, who, divorced Bill when the stuff started coming out about his many visits to Epstein Island, now has just resigned from the Gates Foundation as more and more liability seems to be gathering around around the Gates Foundation and around Bill himself. And then finally on that list, the entire banking system of Cuba is collapsing right now. They're trying to go cashless. They're trying to prepare for a CBDC. And meanwhile, the whole thing is just collapsing and people are left without cash. And it's turning into another Ethiopia-style fiasco that I think is going to help wake people up to not go into the CBDCs.